All right, everybody. Welcome. Blades and Blasters doing a TED Talk tonight. Some free time. Um, and I have Xeipher with me today. And Xeipher's been with us for a few months now and is one of our admin staff. And I want to introduce him today and talk about kind of how he got into role-playing games, kind of the same question I asked Ghost a few months ago when he was on with me, and just kind of go from there. Just go ahead, Xeipher.
Hey, what do you say? The BNB legions. So yeah, I got into role playing maybe about a year back. I was reading a Reddit post that somebody was talking about a campaign they had in D&D and a particular session, and I was reading it, and it seemed extremely it was very detailed in what the character did and what they were able to achieve at the end of it. And I'm like, that sounds extremely creative. I think I can do that. So started researching, how does one play role-playing games? How does one play D&D? And it was initially a little disheartening because it all seemed to revolve around like actual tabletop role-playing. But
you mean like face-to-face, right?
Yeah, face-to-face,
Yeah.
right? And I mean, I'm no longer a place where I can do face-to-face with folks, right? I mean, work and life outside of the tabletop. So then I found Roll20, and then Roll20 led me to join a couple of groups, some successful, some not so successful, until I found Swamp, who was on Blades and Blasters and pulled me to Blades and Blasters. So now, yeah, so that's my on two primary groups, Blades and Blasters, and another one called Barrel Age Adventures. So yeah, those are my two main groups. And since joining Blades and Blasters, I would say I've branched out from D&D. Let's see. I think I joined Blades and Blasters sometime around August, September, I would say. Since then, I've played, let's see, A Song of Ice and Fire, Dark Heresy, which is Warhammer 40K, our own in-house System Light, basically D6 based RPG, Star Wars D6, Westward, and what else?
You played Harnmaster too, right?
Harnmaster as well. So yeah, and I'm actually
Star Trek.
And I'm GMing a game, Star Trek Adventures by Modifius Entertainment. So yeah, it's been a fun last, I would say, 4-5 months.
So before you started doing role playing games, did you play like a lot of video games, that sort of thing, or was that?
Yeah, I did play a lot of video games growing up. Initially started with the old, like knockoffs, Mario knockoffs that I would get in India. Then computer games, mainly first person shooters. I did try a few RPGs, but I could just never, the grind would always get to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it eventually, I was like, hey, I can do so much more by just saying things I would like to do than waiting to level up within the game after grind. And but I did like reading a lot of fantasy novels, right?
Yeah, that's where I was going to go. So it was basically literature then.
Yeah, it was
more than gaming.
Yeah, more than gaming, it was literature that kind of got me into that space. And then it just went off from there. I would say I have been lucky in many ways because I was able to find good groups that led me to my next good group, and so on and so forth. And I think compared to a lot of people I've heard from, spoken to, the fact that I found Blades and Blasters within a year of our role playing is pretty awesome. Not too many horror stories from mine.
Yeah. I mean, so my own personal experience was really not really through live role playing. When I was coming up through role playing, it was more text based online. So So not like live. When I guess I say live, I don't mean like face to face. I
Mhm.
really did. I really never did that. I mean, I've done it a few times, but not really where I came from. I came from online even back in 1995 when I started role playing online.
Wow.
So yeah, so similar, but I mean, the it was such a niche back then.
Mm.
To do that, you didn't have too many people that were that really sucked, right? You did have people that weren't as good as other people, of course, and those people just fell off really quick.
Correct. Yeah.
And then you had this bigger world of all these people who are writing, these large, intricate posts and that's the kind of thing. But it was super time intensive, right? You would sit down and you would role play with one another for 3 hours via text. So it's like, that takes a long time.
Time, yeah.
Yeah, you wait, you post, you wait, you post, you wait, you
Yeah.
post, you wait, yeah. So
And I think,
yeah,
yes, I have played one. I'm currently in one play by post game, and I personally like the format a lot. It just really gives me the opportunity to write and actually get better at writing. I mean,
absolutely.
one thing it's been this past year has been my writing has improved, my vocabulary has improved, right? Because you end up using words you don't really use in your day to day lives. Um, and lots of other little things. You kind of walk around house doing chores, and you start like muttering to yourself what your character would say in a current game that you're in, right? And then my wife looks at me kind of with a weird face, like, "What's this guy on?"
Oh, I'm used to that. I'm used to that.
Yeah, so for her, it's been like this the past year. She's like, "Okay, fine." Yeah, but personally for me, it's been like it's now going from a phase of just games and more into like a hobby, right? At least that's where I see myself going, which I like because I get to like work on Roll20. Uh, hey, I can make better macros than the guy sitting in front of me right now on record. And working on sheets, right? And we do have some things we are working on, like the Star Wars. We're trying to improve the sheet that is already out there. The Star Trek sheet we're trying to improve. So it's not just the playing and GMing, but there are all these other ancillary things that we're trying to do and improve the overall experience. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, one thing this hobby really is, and you can have hobbies that you basically do it and then you forget you do it, you go and do it, and you spend whatever amount of time you do are doing it, and then you forget about it until the next time you do it.
mhm.
This hobby is really not like that. It's actually a lot of work,
Oh
and
yeah.
so and so that means you have to really like it. And if you don't, then like, and see, this is the I call it the D&D mentality, and this might be unfair, right, to people who play D&D, and it's not trying to be disparaging to them, but there are a section of role players who basically they come in, they play a game for whatever the reasons are. Maybe they're doing role play, or maybe they're just doing tactical combat or whatever. But they
Mhm.
do it and they forget about it, right? They might look at, okay, this is what my class can do. What's most advantageous to do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. To me, that's not really what this hobby is. I mean, I
Mhm.
guess it can be, but that's not really the most rewarding part, at least not for me and not for the things that we're trying to do, obviously.
Correct.
Um, but if you're really doing this seriously, it's like a second job
Oh
almost.
yeah,
It
definitely.
really is. It really is, and it puts pressure, time pressure, commitment pressure to whatever else you have to do in life, right? And with me, I'm older, so and I have a wife and a kid, and it really crunches you. It's like, well, what other hobbies? I have a lot of hobbies, right? But those hobbies are more the tend to be I do them and then forget about them, right? But I
And
have it's a personality trait too. Like if I'm really into something as a hobby, then I just really kind of go all into it. And it's yeah.
and the other thing about this particular hobby, I feel, is that it's not just there's a community involved, right? Like when you're playing a role playing game, there's the GM, then there's players. Right now, as a GM, you are responsible for for creating the best game possible for that session, right? I'm not saying you have to be the best all the time, but you're kind of responsible for taking up everybody else's time, right? People have taken time from their busy schedules to be at the virtual table with you, right? And you want to put forth something that will make it worth their while, right? Like they're there, and then you want to entertain them, wow them, and all of that. And as a player, also you have to put in the time, because you're responsible back to the GM, because he's invited you and he's building something for you to entertain you. One particular session might be all about you, right? And all your other players might take the step back and let you shine. And like it's kind of like you're responsible to each other. Unlike many other hobbies, if one day you say, I'm not going to show up today, right? It has a much larger effect. And I'm not saying that I've not done that. I've done that when I first joined this hobby, right? Not on Blades and Blasters, but other places where I was new, and that it, I would say I was not aware of that, right? Till I started GMing a game myself, and like, okay, I put my entire week's worth of effort, and now people are not showing up. Like, what the hell, right? Yeah, I guess that's this one thing about the hobby, is that you have to be active when you're doing it, right? You can't just be sitting at the table like, okay, yeah, I do this, or yeah, it's very challenging that way. At least I feel.
Yeah, and there's absolutely been times I was like, oh God, I don't want to play tonight, or I don't want to run this game tonight. I feel like crap, or I'm not into it tonight. And you just like, dude, just power through it, do it. And then you get there and you start doing it, and everything's forgotten. No matter how tired you are, no matter how crappy you feel, you have a good time. Yeah, it's just the way it is, right? With anything.
Yes.
I mean, sometimes you just don't feel like doing shit, right? But especially from a GM's perspective, you typically, if you're GM, what I usually say is the GM at least puts in double the amount of time that it takes to run the game. So if the game is a 4-hour game, then you put in 8 hours into that game.
At least, yeah.
And that I mean, maybe not in all situations, and it's flexible and variable, but a lot of times, yes.
Yeah,
I mean, just setting up Roll20 takes a good part of that time, and it's just nature of the beast and whatever, but it happens, right?
Yeah, because you're virtual and you don't have to be all at the same location, but then the consequences that you have to set up the virtual environment, set up the challenge sheets, and then at Blades and Blasters we love our macros, so setting up those macros can be painful, but hey, they work out. So
yeah, in game they save time. So
in game they save time, right? And it's you do it all so that everybody is then concentrating on the role play rather than, I need to open the char sheet, find that particular attribute, click that button, so.
I mean, like, for instance, Shadow of the Demon Lord by Darren, he does macros too, and they're pretty good. And like last session, I didn't open my character sheet one time.
Yeah, because you're not paying attention to that. You're just you know what button to click. You're going to click it, and you're paying attention to more about what you're going to say when the action happens, and how you're going to build up to it, and then take away from that. So a lot of good stuff. It's been, like I'd say, like these past 6 months, it's more than role playing itself, right? It's a lot more than that. It's been how to set up games, how to narrate, how to write for it. May not have been TED Talks, but we've been, on Discord servers, we've been chatting about all that stuff. So
it's also just, it's also a social thing, right? Especially when you get older, you get a family. You can't go to the bar as much. At least I can't, unfortunately. And so it gives you kind of a release in that way too. And then I know people don't really probably think of it in those terms a lot, but yeah, it's a social outlet too, for sure, right?
In addition to that, I think it's sometimes an emotional outlet also, right? Like you're role playing a character. Sometimes those characters might do things that you might have been thinking about subconsciously, right? You might be processing some things in your life, and you're like, let the character do it, it works out, and you're like,
Yeah.
I'm
Martin
done
Moon, the madman, a maiden pool is my subconscious coming out of
with. Yeah, exactly. And then you have your mad henchman running behind you. So
That's right. That's right. He just wants death. Xeipher's thing for the first 10 games he played in Blades and Blasters was just wanting to kill himself.
Just
So
wanting to kill myself.
we're like,
exactly.
okay, don't cut yourself, Xeipher. We like you. We promise.
But like a glorious death, yo, a glorious death. It's remembered. Yeah. And I'm in many ways, I'm hoping that other folks like me, when I mean like me, like the Indians like me, right? They also get into the games because, and I think that's what Tet, I think we're both trying to do is that, like, Indian mythology has a lot of rich stories, right? And I know some people may not like that. Hey, it's more religious, and you shouldn't shouldn't be role playing that. But that's their belief. But I feel some of this we can role play, right? And like you're telling me how you guys played Mahasarpa, and reading that, I'm like, wow, this is amazing, right? And there's things you guys learned from it. I'm like, hey, you guys have experienced some part of my culture through games, which is awesome. And getting the chance to do that, I think that's also, I look forward to that.
Yeah, I mean, you look at role-playing games in general, they're all based on some sort of culture's mythology, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that could be, religious or, what they thought at the time was religion. Like if you think of Norse mythology, there's a lot of that. We call it mythology now, but they called it religion then, right?
Yes.
And, you see that a lot. And Mahasarpa was probably one of the best role-playing games in settings that I ever played, right? And it was based on Indian culture. Right, and so I really enjoyed it. I mean, and I did learn things that, of course, weren't real, germane to my life that I would never have known. Like, what's the castes of what's a Castoria?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but like a Tolwar. I didn't know that sword exists. I would just call it a scimitar, right?
Scimitar, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, there's the differences and all that and stuff. So
yeah,
it's interesting. And
yeah.
so you guys know, Xeipher and I are kind of developing a setting called Dharma, which is based on Indian culture. So hopefully one day you will see that on Drive Through RPG.
Yeah, that would be awesome. That would be quite something. Yes,
that's the goal. We'll see.
Yeah,
So, so I feel that it's an interesting thing to see. All I mean, you just read there's a lot of things in role playing that have made me learn things about real things.
Yes.
So the GURPS splat books, for instance, so they are really rich in whatever topic they're talking about, more so than system type things. So there are a lot of splat books, particularly for third edition GURPS. They're outstanding stuff. Like Camelot, there's a GURPS Camelot book, and it's basically cliff notes on Malloy, right? Malloy's Camelot. So if you want to know anything about King Arthurian legend, you go there and and it's right there instead of actually having to read it in Old English, which is, I tried to read it, I just couldn't do it. It was awful. But I mean, and so they'd be right. But
yeah, and I think that's how you end up learning, because you end up having fun playing the game, and you end up learning something new about maybe a subculture trying to emulate or simulate within your game. So
yep, cool. So I guess the next topic we're gonna move on to, we wanted to talk about kind of so when a GM so I mentioned this last TED talk, and we were talking about it, or I was talking about it a little bit, and that was kind of we're having a limit on concurrent games, and it looks like we're going to be pretty good in January from the scheduling I've seen to end 4 games probably. So
Yeah.
I think Shadow of the Demon Lord, Darren's game, is the only one that won't get ended. So I think everything else probably will, and so we're going to have a whole slew of new GMs coming in. So we'll talk about those games briefly and kind of come to the next topic. So the first game that will be coming back in is Xeipher's Star Trek Adventures game, which was put on pause to let all these games that had been running longer finish.
Mm-hmm.
So Xeipher's game will be coming back in. Hopefully, it will run generally a week, every week. And so that's the first game. The next game, I believe, that's scheduled is Swamp Donkey's Traveler,
Mm-hmm.
which you probably, if you're watching this, you might have seen that he and I did a character generation example and tutorial on Blades and Blasters, which you can find. So
Mm-hmm.
please just go this way on the list of videos, and you'll see that. Then I believe it's Grant's Shadows of the Demon Lord campaign, Hopeless Deep, which was scheduled to start before we made the decision to kind of limit the games at a time. So that will start, and Shadow of the Demon Lord, from my experience, has been really good. So there's that game going to start, and then finally, I believe the next game in is Demi's D&D if he's ready in time, or Malfane's GURPS game, basically however that unfolds, right, as far as timing goes. I think Malfane is ready, so he would go in if Demi's not. So, and then it's probably going to be me or Ghost, because our games are pretty much up, and I have two set. I'm probably going to be done at least by the week of the 14th. I don't know what day exactly, but that will probably be my finale for Hunter of the Vigil, and he might be done in a similar time frame with the Gutter Blades campaign. So I think his plan afterwards is not to run a campaign, to just run his episodic stuff and his one-off stuff with System Light, etc. For a while. So it would be me. And so I've been kind of thinking in the back of my head. I've done some work on some one shots, which I can plug in, and I have my episodic stuff, which is going to be the Dark Heresy stuff, which will be my episodic. Episodic for us just means there's no set players. Any player can play. That's basically the only rule. Is any player can play, and it should not, in every instance possible, you do not want a session to you don't want a adventure to expand over one session. You don't want to do that. You want to keep it contained in one session. That way anybody can play at any time. And they're essentially one shots, but just kind of tied together with a thing.
With the story, yeah.
Yeah, so the story. So there's a couple of those floating out there, and Bose is the only one getting run currently. But Ghost was talking about doing them, and I'm going to pull up Dark Heresy because I don't want to bring that back in as a campaign, I don't think. So I'll do that kind of when I'm not a GM, probably mostly. But then we're kind of talking about what I will do as a GM, and we kind of want to go through that process of how do you decide what you want to run? Yeah, sometimes it's very easy. Well, I always run this, or I always run that. Well, that's not Blades and Blasters.
Correct.
Right? We don't do that. What we want to do is experience a lot of different systems. Yeah, we might have systems we like. We might like settings we like. That's all great. But at the end of the day, it's all about experimentation and seeing what's out there and playing different kind of games. When I was doing play-by-post, one of my biggest problems, or my play-by-post side, excellent role play. I could get in enough games probably to keep me sustained like as much as I wanted to roleplay. But I couldn't get people to play things like Traveler. I couldn't get people to play things like GURPS. It was, here are the games. Pathfinder, primarily on that site. Pathfinder, D&D, Tor, and some sort of 40K game. That's it.
Yeah.
And so we, in the Song of Ice and Fire too. That's the game I could get people to play. And so it's like, well, I can't experience this thing because I don't have the people to do that with me, right?
Correct.
And so the question is, what do you how do you decide what to do then in that case? Well, the first thing I did, and I think people should do, is look kind of in this scenario is look, hey, what do you like to run? And to me, it's anything. So that wasn't really germane to me. So the question then became, what else is being run at the same time? And I kind of looked at, and I don't even know if I've shared this with you, Cypher. I've looked at like kind of the things that are being run now and that will be run at when I probably am running, and it's a lot of sci-fi.
Mm-hmm.
And so I decided, yeah, I won't do sci-fi. And my games right now are actually not fantasy based at all. It's modern and sci-fi, so sci-fantasy, whatever you want to call 40K. And so I was like, yeah, I'm going to do a fantasy, just whatever. Now it could be, and then you have subgenres of fantasy, right? Which I'm more towards dark fantasy and low fantasy. So I'm not exactly sure where I'm going to go with that, but it's that I've kind of narrowed it down to that. And then it's like, do you have a specific setting in mind? And I don't currently. Probably it will be homebrew of some sort, like most of my stuff is. Although I guess I haven't shown that because A Song of Ice and Fire is A Song of Ice and Fire, even though it's highly edited, highly deviates from what George R.R. Martin has written in the books. But yeah, it'll be something akin to Mist of Morning type of
setting.
Setting. So when I look, I've looked at probably, I don't know, 20 or so systems, and just kind of skimming to see what kind is out there and what I might want to look at. What I know I don't want to do is do something I've already done, a lot at least, or something that we already are running.
Okay.
So Shadows of the Demon Lord is very, very, very popular right now. We will have 2 games running Shadows of the Demon Lord, so that immediately I said no. Another thing I personally enjoy a lot more is either very broad class-based systems, so not D&D where you have like 20 different starting classes and they're very, very specific. More like, okay, there's 3 classes: rogue, fighter, priest, or wizard, whatever, right? And so you have something very broad. That's okay-ish, but really I like classless systems.
You like classless systems, you were saying.
Yeah. So like GURPS is a classic example of a classless system. It's a point-buy system. A Song of Ice and Fire is a point-buy system. I've always gravitated to those systems because I feel you can build your character in absolutely any way you want. There's no restrictions.
So then how does this go where, like, say you have the setting, right? Now setting can be applied to, like, say, something like GURPS, right? GURPS is generic and universal. Traveler, for example, is, from whatever I've read in that book, it's actually generic and universal when it comes to like space sci-fi based, right? So sometimes does it make sense to have maybe the same setting, but a different kind of like same rule set but different setting? Like, do you differentiate between the rule set and the setting, or do they go hand in hand?
They don't necessarily go hand in hand at all. I could easily take like Shadows Demon Lord has a setting. If I was using Shadow of the Demon Lord, it would not necessarily be the Shadow of the Demon Lord setting. Or like a couple of games I'm looking at are Shadows of Esterin, for instance, that has a setting. I don't think I would use that setting. There are some settings that are more ingrained, or systems that are more ingrained in the setting. For instance, all these books right there that you're seeing, The Legend of the Five Rings. Legend of the Five Rings is one of my favorite role-playing games. I really enjoy Asian culture and Asian things in general, and so especially the samurai culture and that kind of thing. And that game is really tied together with that, you would have to do some serious work to uncouple it.
Sure. Okay.
Because, for instance, when you're creating your characters, you say, I'm from this clan, and I am from, I do this school. So basically, you're saying your race in a very generic way, your race and your class.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what you're really saying.
Correct. And it
So
doesn't translate across many different settings. Like you can't just say like, what is that? The Ijutsu, the you can't just say like, yeah, I'm an Ijutsu orc.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Jutsu. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
It's dueling with swords. Right.
Correct.
So, yeah. So, and even your name of your skills, and there's like advantages and disadvantages very specific to Legend of the Five Rings, like, fate of your ancestors and the kami around you, and things that are very that setting specific. Those are a lot harder to pull apart, right? There are some that are really difficult, and it can be done, but it takes a lot of work. And at that point, you're like, shit, why don't I just do something else, right? That's similar, right? Oh, I want a dice pool system. All right, well, I can do XYZ. So yeah, it is not as easy all the time, right? So that's an example of where it's very hard to pull it out. Now there are some that are very easy. For instance, let's look at World of Darkness. If you did just the World of Darkness core, and I'm talking about New World of Darkness, whatever second edition. I'm very confused about the editions of World of Darkness these days, but I'm talking about the ones that go along with Vampire the Requiem and all that stuff. But anyway, if you just use the core book, you could use that as Universal's GURPS, right? If you wanted to. I mean, modern setting, go right. That's all it is. There's a lot. There's a lot of things you can do like that. Like I think like the Shadows of Estrin game that I was talking about, you can do that. But there's also a lot of games that are just generic built too, right? Just generic built. Like I was looking at Fantasy Age, and I was, of course, there's like things like GURPS and D&D. Those things are really kind of generic to setting if you want them to be.
So then I guess my next question would be, so say like you're saying, right, like we are all busy and we have lives outside of the virtual tabletop. So when you have to come up with a new game, you have a new setting and a new rule system, right? Do you and say you are in a situation where the rule system is going to take some time to learn even as a GM, and then you also have to kind of figure out a new setting and define it. So other times you're like, you know what, I'm just going to use this rule system that I'm comfortable with, but it's generic enough. But I'm going to spend time on my setting and expand that out, right? So what do you like to do sometimes? Do you like always like new rules, new settings, or like try and mix it up? And
well, in our world, right, I think you got to do both. Well, you don't have to do the new setting, not necessarily. But I think the setting and the system doing new things is kind of what we do. So you kind of got to figure it out. Now the system stuff I find is pretty easy, because you can learn things as you go. You don't need to know every detail rule. The only system that I know, like from front to back, 90% of it is A Song of Ice and Fire, and that's because I've been running for 10 years. That's the only reason. Every other system that I feel competent with, I don't know it all. It just doesn't happen. So you got to have that expectation, and this is what's hard about live games compared to play by post. And play by post, I don't need to know the system that well.
Sure. Yeah.
I can look up the rules whenever I want, right? Now there are play-by-post games that you play synchronously, right? But that's not usually how it works, right? It's asynchronous. Somebody posts, I come to the computer late, then I post. Oh, I got to look up the rule. That took me 10 minutes. That took me 5 minutes to post, whatever. But My thing is like really the way I like to do my settings in general is do them small
Mm-hmm.
and then kind of expand.
Mm.
So I don't need to know everything about a setting. I don't need to know. I here's what I need to know. At first, I come up with a big blanket idea. Okay, this is the setting in a very generic kind of way, right? This is dark fantasy. Here is the major things that people should know, and then you take it and you just kind of zoom in, right? You
Mm-hmm.
zoom very in to what you're going to start with for the players, and then you let it expand kind of naturally.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. Mm.
and this is an interesting thing. There's George R. R. Martin. Um, I've seen this, and I think it was him, interview where he was talking about the two different writing styles of authors, and there's architects and there's gardeners,
Mm.
right? And so gardeners plant something and let it grow, which is basically saying start small and then expand. Or
Mm-hmm.
there's architects who build everything, you know, in a very
Mm-hmm.
finite way,
Wait.
big first, right? And that can work, but it's hard. And a lot of people don't have time for that kind of crap, right? I don't have
Right.
time to do everything, right? I just don't. Um, so,
And the players
so
might
what?
not hit most of it also. You never know.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. You might
Mm.
not use any of that crap. So you build small and you like kind of let it grow. As far as a system, you learn and you build your session and you learn what you need for that session.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you have to improvise, you do the best you can, and then you just make a ruling on it and you go. Because what you don't want to like sit there and look in through a book for 10 minutes
Yeah.
every time you need to do something. So you just kind of play it off. He's like, okay, well, I make it this skill roll or this skill roll, whatever, and you just go.
Mm-hmm.
So you allocate your time resources out of game to whatever you need. I think a GM should spend a little time researching a new system if he's going to run it, so he's like somewhat proficient at it. I mean, not even proficient, but just like he has some idea. He shouldn't do the thing where here's the worst thing: thinking you know something and you don't. And we've seen that
Yes, we
just
have seen
the
that.
last couple of weeks. You think you know something, somebody offers you advice, and ignorance is the worst, right? Ignorance. And when I say, I'm very very being very specific about the definition of ignorance, and that's not knowing, right? You don't you don't necessarily know you need to improve if you don't know you need to improve,
Mm.
right?
Yep. And yeah,
So
and that's the thing, when you come at this, like I was saying, as a hobby, then you are looking to improve all the time, right? Like,
yeah,
because
I hope so.
I mean, at least I am. I mean, I hope, and I know many of the folks on BNB are, because otherwise it just gets repetitive, right? If you're doing this, I'm not even saying you're doing the same thing. You could be doing multiple different things, but in the same way every single time. Then, right? Then what's the point?
Yeah, and I think that's a reason why you do different systems, different characters, different character types. Why, like, why play a fighter every time? Why? I mean, we're being generic. Right? Why play a fighter? Why play a rogue every time? Why
Yeah.
play a backstabber every time? Why play, a certain, I'm a good guy. I'm a bad guy. Why do that every time? Expand what you're gonna do. Expand how you play. Explain what that's the only way you get better.
Right. And in those, even within those, it's like you know, like being a bad guy. I personally feel being a bad guy is not easy, right?
Mhm.
Because you are trying to be a bad guy in character, but out of character, you're trying to be a good player with everybody else around you, right? So you're trying to balance a whole bunch of things. So yes, like not playing the good guy always all the time can get boring eventually, right?
Mhm.
Once in a while playing the bad guy, or killing someone, as we recently did.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, yeah, play player versus player is different, but
yeah.
That's another thing that you kind of have to look at. Let's talk about it for a minute. We'll just do an aside real quick on
Yeah.
player versus player. So we had a little, and we had a PvP, um, in a one shot, the latest Song of Ice and Fire game. So one thing I noticed about PvP always, anytime I've ever seen it done, is people get irritated with each other.
Yeah.
In a way, it doesn't matter why they do, because you're talking about like just kind of like I don't know what it is. It's like a subconscious. Even if you don't really care, you do you always want to win? I don't know. I don't know why, but it's hard to kind of put your thumb on it, but it really is like almost every time somebody's a little irritated.
Yes, and I guess it's not just about winning. It's because by the middle of it or by the end of the session, you are invested in your character, right? I mean, otherwise, why would you have spent 3 hours as that person, right? So it's not winning in the classical definition. I absolutely agree, but you want that person to succeed in whatever they're doing, right? And and to be honest with the folks who are watching and may not know what the session we're talking about, is that I was the one who did the killing, right? I was the one who initiated. And I can say from my perspective, there's definitely an irritation, is that I'm forced to do this. Like, is there any way I cannot do this? But then would I be true to the character, or is this exactly what my character would be doing? And then you're like, am I spoiling somebody else's time at the table? And you kind of and then that whole thing kind of starts looping out of.
Yeah, I think as long as you're being true to the character, then do what you will, right? That's my opinion. Now, it's a GM's responsibility to not put you into a position where you're playing people that are just gonna just kill each other,
Sure.
immediately and that
Yes.
kind of crap. And
Yeah, and that
I
didn't happen. To be honest,
yeah,
that didn't happen. Yeah, it organically grew, but I have to say that everybody at that virtual table, you can make out they were extremely mature about the whole process, right? And I think that's one more, like, testament to BNB, is that the folks on the server are mature players who know that there's really nothing personal about that that entire event within the game. That's what the game was, right? And you
do you think that some of that maturity level and kind of like I don't know if you want to just maturity, but basically the how do I explain this? I guess a maturity, good naturedness, responsibility, all that kind of thing showing up for games is due to what do you think it's due to? Do you think it's due to age? Because I'd say as a group we're kind of older than most people, right?
yes, I would say a part of it is, you know, maybe due to age. But I guess so. I would say I wouldn't discount it. I think it's definitely plays a big role, age and experience, right? Like, that, as the player I killed later told me when we kind of chatted offline, he's like, "Yeah, dude, it's pretend, right? I'm not going to hold you responsible for what we're doing." So that definitely comes with age and experience for sure. But I also
Yeah, well,
feel,
well, Doc is very old too, and happy birthday to Doc.
oh yeah, happy birthday to Doc. Yes, exactly, the old fart, and my best buddy, my best pal. But I think it's also the way we are, right? We don't just say, "Hey, let's meet on Wednesday at 9 p.m. and we'll play," and then not talk to each other for the rest of the week, right? I think most of it also comes from the fact that we keep chatting with each other on the server, discussing bullshit, games, rules, and you get the sense of the person you're playing with. You get the sense more that, like, it's not just that person and that character at the table. You get the sense of who they are, what they think, what they, and like, okay, this person may or may not like this, right? and sometimes you have to factor it in, because end of the day, you are playing with them, you will play with them. Some folks like it, some folks don't like it. So I think that helps. I would say the other half of it, like age, yes, I would say maybe a good chunk of it, and then the other thing is this community that we have built, that we get to talk with each other, and we do more than just play a game a week and then not you know not um, not interact. And
Yeah, I
those
mean, it goes back to that social interaction, right? You're friendly to each other in a social manner, even though that's via Discord or, talking,
yeah, but
on the phone or whatever.
exactly, but you share quite a bit even in that social interaction, right? Like, I mean, if you really think about the way we talk to each other, you kind of get a sense of who the other person is, right? And like, that the person is not malicious, right? It's not like, yeah, I'm just here to make you look like a douche, or I'm gonna be a douche all the time, right? It's not that. It just so happened in the game, and cool beans. Next time it can happen to the other person, and no big deal, right? But I think the irritation will not go away, right? Because I think that it's a good sign. It means that the person cared about the game, cared about the character, and it's okay, right? I think
Yeah.
it's okay. Um, it's when it goes beyond irritation, when it goes, which I don't think will happen anymore, when folks rage quit and all that shit. But
Yeah. So, I guess and that kind of like spins off to another question is what happens when it doesn't necessarily have to be PvP, but character death stuff, which we haven't seen a lot of, I don't think,
Mhm.
in a way yet. But I mean, Hardmaster was pretty brutal to people, but um, that game was a little different too. Because the question is, what happens when you have a very large investment in a character? Either that's by your own personal investment, or you've just played the character a long time,
Mhm.
and that character either dies or gets PvP death. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
so
that
how
can,
that changes?
yeah, that I think, again, I guess it comes down to, you know, I mean, I think for me, from personally, I would be I would be pissed, right? And in many ways, I think you have to allow time for people to be pissed. Right? It's like we've all played video games, right? And when we die at the last boss fight, pretty much all of us would have thrown our controller in disgust and walked away.
Yeah,
But you still come back and play it, right? It is, I think that's more important, coming back to the table and playing, right? Like, take the time to emotionally process what has just happened. I mean, there is no other way to put it. You're going to be emotionally wrecked about it, because it's like
yeah,
you might have built this character from the ground up, from level 0, from level 1, and you know and something, that day the dice just did not you know um agree with you. But I guess an experienced GM would also see it, right? Maybe give the guy a way out, right? So it's a mix of both. Like, maybe give the guy a way out, and they take the way out and then come back later, or like, you know um sometimes you just embrace it, like sometimes, like I do,
yeah.
embrace it. Maybe it's a glorious death, maybe it's the most meaningful thing that could have happened in the campaign.
See
Let it
that's the
happen.
thing. That's the GM's job. If he's going to kill you, hopefully it's in a way. If especially if it's like a character that's been around for a long time. God, like for instance, Otto, right, in Darren's game, the
Mhm.
Shadow Demon Lord, I love that character. He's such a dick face, and I love him. He's the money grubbing dick face. But when he dies, because I'm sure he will eventually, because he just has just about everybody hating him and the shit he did last session. Anyway, so when he dies, I hope it's glorious because it's coming.
Yeah, because that's where the stories are coming from, right? Like, I mean, and those are the stories that you'll be telling after the game is done. You're like, oh, dude, do you remember that time when Otto got, like,
Yeah,
smacked in the face? Oh yeah, so it's, I think even that's important. So yeah, I guess everybody should give time to process the emotion, but also embrace it if it makes sense. And I think that's where it's important from the player's perspective, right? So, like, yeah, it may be the GM's uh, responsibility up to some extent to make it meaningful, make it glorious if possible, right? But it's also the player's responsibility to see the larger picture, right? It is
Yeah.
not, it's not
The-
your player's story, right? It is the collective story around the table. Every player is important there. So, don't spoil it for everybody else, I guess.
yeah. Yeah, and I think what we might see a little bit of that coming up in kind of the finale of some of these games where that kind of stuff is possible. Um, I know that in the game I'm running, it is 100% possible.
The
So
Hunt of the Vigil.
yes, it's
Yeah.
like bad things will and can happen, and so and I'm guessing that that's definitely true in the Gutter Blades game too.
Mhm.
That's coming up. Now I don't necessarily know about the other games, but um, I I think we'll see some of that. And the games are ending, so maybe it's not that big of a deal, right, to people. But
No,
um,
also, I think at least on BNB, all the GMs outright state like, hey, this is, you know, a pretty high fatality game, or this is a pretty brutal setting, right? And in many ways, that's a good reminder. Like, hey, don't do anything stupid, right? Like, if you think that this is a fight you need to run away from it,
yeah,
um, and run away from it together. Like, make sure everybody else, your player group, knows. Like, dude, let's just get the fuck out of here. This is not going to go down well. No need to be a hero right now.
yeah,
So yeah, so it's I guess it's a mixture of all of that, and it, like you've been saying, it comes from practice, and the community we have is that, like, hey, no hard feelings, like, it's fine. I'm going to be pissed at you right now. I'm not going to talk to you for the next hour or maybe a day. Just leave me alone. Let me be frustrated and angry and scream at you, but I'll be back, right? But make it a date, not more than that.
24-hour butt hurt limit.
Yeah, 24 hour. But and then just say like, hey guys, I'm hurting right now, so you all can go fuck yourselves. I'll talk to you tomorrow.
I'm gonna go drink some scotch.
Yeah, drink some scotch, gonna smoke some weed, and I'm checking out. Yeah,
Well,
but
if you
hey,
do,
there's some
yeah,
interesting things happening. I mean, Tor is going to come to an end, the One Ring.
yeah,
So
we might
that's
all freaking die.
yeah, all freaking die. So yeah, I think I'm excited for the new rule set. What do you think? Like the with you ending in, say, sometime the midweek of Jan and starting in March, is it something new for you that you now have time to create a new game while games are running, so you can get to play, be involved, and then build stuff?
Yeah, as a player, it takes so much less effort, right, than doing GM. Right, for a player, I spend an hour a week thinking about my characters, probably
Hmm.
total. If I have two games, maybe and whatever I need to do crunch wise to level them up or whatever you want to call it. It takes minor. Sometimes I'll practice voices and stuff.
Hmm.
And that sort of thing. But otherwise, not really any major effort. Where
Hmm.
GMing takes so much effort, right? And so, yeah, what I would be doing at the time is either developing one shots or kind of developing this game kind of front end, and so it is ready to rock and roll when it comes.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so, hopefully, my hope is, although I won't front load everything. That's just not possible because you don't
Yeah.
know what's going to happen necessarily. I'll have the base right there so I don't have to mess with stuff as it comes. And so it gives me less things to do later on.
Yeah, when the game is actually going, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So hopefully that this new cycle actually sets in well, and folks kind of get accustomed to it, and we run more efficiently. Efficiency is what we're after.
Yeah. um, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, there's some things I still have questions on how it's going to work, right? And the very differences. It's like, oh, everybody's running one a week. Well, I can't play all these games now because I can't play them 4 games a week, right? That kind
Sure.
of
Yeah.
thing. Or it's like, yeah, man, I don't know. It's going to be, but then you still think it's like, oh, well, I played the same exact amount of games. I just played more of the same game,
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. I mean, because we sometimes we're like, hey, I'm free right now. Let's play a one shot, right? And now you'll be playing the same game once a week. And I think it's a good mix. If certain GMs can do one a week, if the systems allow them to do one a week, right? Like you were saying, certain systems are easier to write for than some certain other systems,
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
Like I've seen the amount of work Bo puts in on the One Ring, and
Hmm.
it shows in the production at the end of the day, right? So, and certain systems are easier to run once a week, and it kind of gives everybody that leeway as a community, right? Because you're still trying to get things done within your cycle within those 3 months, so that the next GM who's been prepping while you've been playing, you don't want to hold them back, right? Because that's not fair either. So,
Yeah,
um,
if they're ready to go, they should get in, right?
yeah,
And it might be that eventually we're like, maybe we need another game concurrently. I don't know.
yeah,
We'll see. We'll see. I mean, that could be the case, but I think player involvement any more than four at this point, I don't see it. There's very few people who can play in more than 4 games a week.
yeah, yes.
I don't see it. I just don't see it, especially if they're GMing, because GMing you have to like spend your off time doing it
Without
too,
trying
right?
to say I'm already in like more than for a week, without having to reschedule games because you're in some other games, right?
Right.
Which was not. I mean, it was just kind of becoming a problem, right?
Yeah.
So, so yeah,
Yeah.
interesting stuff
Definitely
for
one of the problems. Yeah, because you have to worry about scheduling for not only real life what you get
yeah,
going on, but now you have to also really pay attention to, oh shit, I'm in these 6 games or
yeah,
8 games, and it's
yeah.
just,
And it also becomes a pain for the GM because he's like, oh wait, you committed to that GM 2 weeks ago. Now I can't just make you drop that game and come join my game, right?
right.
Yeah, it becomes a hassle end of the day. So yeah, I think this new
Yeah, I mean,
format.
if you're playing 2 games a week and that's it, then you're going to easily be able to schedule,
Yeah,
right? Or
yeah,
or for the most part, you will be too.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
Let's go. Anything else for tonight?
no, just looking forward to 2018, the 2018 season of BNB.
BBQ1.
BNB Q1.
Uh, yeah, we don't know what all the games are going to be yet, but for 3 for sure we'll be joining. I believe every game will be ending except Darren's Shed of the Demon Lord game in January. Um, Chris is no longer with us at BNB, so Grey Wall is done. So that freed up a spot. As I always say, if you guys want to play good games out there on YouTube who might see this video if you've lasted this long because we've been talking for a while, if you guys want to play good games with good people, with different systems and different settings, um, come play games with us on Blades and Blasters. We'll treat you right, probably. And
At
hope,
least we
hope,
will, hopefully, yes, we'll do
yeah,
our
hope
best.
you'll do our best. I will be as nice as possible. I will be kind to you. No. So in all seriousness, please, we really enjoy people coming off our YouTube channel to play with us, and we've had really good success with those players. Just know we don't cater to one system. We don't cater to one setting. If you see a game like I really want to play Conan or something, that's fine, but also come willing to play other games if possible. We don't really tend to like our players to just stick to one type of game. It really doesn't work for us. We do have some people who do that, and those people don't play a lot. It's the way it goes. So if you have some time, you want to play, yeah, come on, let's play. You can find us. You can send Blades and Blasters a YouTube message, or you can go to our linked website, and that will have our link to our Discord. And you can come in and say, "Hey, I'm blah blah blah, and I found you on the internet, and Ted has the best macros on Blades and Blasters, and you'll be a red before you know it if you say stuff like that." So
No, 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 that's incorrect.
it probably is, but I'm the real purple, not the pink. So I get to say what I want.
Moist.
Moist pig. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. There were some viewers tonight. And if you watch this in the future, as I said, come join us. And if you have any questions, just feel free to comment on any of our videos. I always respond, I think. And yeah, good night, Xeipher.
Good night.
Good night.
And
Talk
Happy
to
New
you guys
Year.
later. Yep.